Bonnie. And I'm Benika. We're twin sisters based in Virginia in the United States of America. And we are so excited to be here today teaching you guys about computer science. And this workshop is brought to you by the Seminate Initiative. Seminate is basically a global initiative which strives to advocate for STEM opportunities in education, which makes the world a more interconnected place. And so today we're going to be teaching you guys and providing you guys with an introduction to computer science, especially because technology and computers are on the rise. And so we wanted to really introduce you guys to the skills necessary in going to this career field. And the way we're doing this is by utilizing Scratch programming, which is an introductory form of coding that involves blocks. This will be great for improving your digital literacy, as well as just improving on your critical thinking, problem solving, and cognitive skills, which are all definitely amazing skills to have in whatever career you decide to go in. So without further ado, let's get started. So before we can make our game, first we need to make an account on Scratch. And so as you can see here, right next to my cursor, this URL is what you would type in your search engine in order to get onto the Scratch website. And so you would type scratch.mit.edu, and then you would get onto this website. Once you're on this website, what we want to do is we want to make an account. And you would do this by clicking the Join Scratch button. Okay, now what you can do is you can create a username. And this can be anything, but it is recommended to not use your real name. So maybe use a hobby that you like. And then you can create a password. And then you can click Next. Then it's going to ask you what country do you live in. So you can say the country, and then you can add when were you born, and then you can input what's your gender, and then you can add your parents' email address. And it's going to ask you to review the community guidelines. And so on your own time, you can go ahead and review all of the guidelines that Scratch recommends. And when you're done, you're going to be taken onto this screen and this page. And what we want to do is we want to create a game today. And the way you will create a project is you will click on this button at the top of the screen. It says Create. And there we go. This is the place where we will be creating our game today. And now let's talk about the different types of blocks. These are the motion blocks. They control the movement of the sprites. Next, these are the looks blocks. And what the looks blocks do is they change the appearance of the sprites. These are the sound blocks. They control the sound effects and music. The next category is called the events blocks, and these are very important. What these blocks do is they start scripts when certain events happen, such as this block right here, which is when the green flag is clicked. And we will be explaining what this block does in detail in a bit. Next, here are the control blocks. These blocks control the flow of the program. The next type of blocks is the sensing blocks. And the sensing blocks detect conditions like touching another sprite or mouse position. Here are the operator blocks. These perform math and logical operations to help make your life much easier. The next category of blocks is called the variables. And what these do is they store and manipulate data. For example, you can set variables and change variables. Finally, here are my blocks. Basically, in this category, you can create custom blocks that allow you to reuse code as well as perform various functions. Okay, guys, so now we can dive into actually coding the game. And today we're going to be making a simple, fun ping pong game that you can enjoy in your free time. And this will really show how the different types of blocks that we discussed interact with one another in order to produce such a great game that you can play. Okay, so first what we're gonna do is we're gonna be making the ball that's supposed to be bouncing off of an item called the paddle, which I'll get more into in a little bit. And so what you want to do is first click the trash can button on Sprite 1 to delete the sprite. And then yes, you want to delete the sprite. And now what you're going to do is you're going to click this choose a sprite and then click the paint feature. Once you do that, you're brought to this screen, and what we're going to do is you're going to be clicking on this circular shape, and then you'll just drag it to form a circle. Then I'm just going to drag this to the middle. And feel free to customize it with whichever color you want and different types of aesthetics that you would like. For example, I could change the color to pink. And then I could click on this paint bucket sprite and then just put it on top to change the color, for example. And I'm going to title this sprite as ball just so we can be consistent throughout the program. So there's a area right above here where you can just type in the name of the sprite. So I have ball. And then just go back to your code. And now I'm also going to be making a sprite called paddle, but I will actually be helping you guys code along with Bumika in a little bit. And so the same thing, click choose a sprite, click the paintbrush, and now you're going to be clicking on the rectangle icon and then dragging it to form a rectangle. I'm going to drag it to the middle. And then what I'm going to do is I personally want it to be green, so I'll be changing it to dark green. And I will title this paddle. Okay, perfect. Now let's get on to the coding. So as you can see, first we want to make it so that whenever the user is clicking on the green flag, that the game begins. And this might not make a whole lot of sense right now, but it definitely will by the end of this program, which I'll definitely show you what it means to click the green flag and what it does for your program. So you're going to go to the events portion. You're going to drag when green flag is clicked. And by the way, this is all going in your ball sprites. So make sure that you're on the correct sprite, which is ball. Okay, so basically what we first want is for the ball to go to a random position so that it makes it harder for the user to actually beat you in the game. And so I'm going to click on go to random position and just drag it and drop it. Furthermore, then basically what we want the ball to do is to move a certain amount of steps and do that continuously throughout the whole program. And so if you remember, anything to do with movement will have to have a motion block, and those motion blocks are in blue. And so we're going to be doing the move block, and you can change it to whichever number you like, depending on how fast you want the game to be. So for example, you can start off with 15 steps, and then, like I said, you want this to happen for the whole game. You don't want it to just stop after like 10 clicks or anything. So you're going to go to the control panel and then click on the forever block and drag and drop it. And now what's interesting that I want you to pay attention to is that you're going to have to drag the move 15 steps block into the forever block. This will ensure that throughout the whole game, the ball will keep continuously moving. And so when you click the green flag, you'll see that the ball does move. It moves. But we want it so that whenever the ball hits the edge, which is over here and over here, for example, then it bounces off because that's what balls in a ping pong game do. So again, we're going to go to the motion blocks and we're going to click if on edge bounce. And what this block does is it ensures that the ball doesn't just fly across the screen, and it allows the ball to bounce off of the edge so that the user can continue to play. Yes, and as you can see here, it's starting to bounce. But this is getting one step closer to how we want this game to be. And so it's just bouncing continuously. And now you see how the ball is just bouncing left and right and left and right, and it's going to go on forever. So we want it to go into various positions, hopefully so that it'll be able to collide with the paddle in one or a few instances. So what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to turn the ball so it's a few degrees to the right or the left, and this will ensure it starts going diagonal. So for example, I'm going to make it turn 15, I'm going to make it turn 20 degrees. And so now when I click the green flag, you can see it's starting to actually move in more random positions and it's going diagonal, which is what we want. Okay, so now basically the goal of the ping pong game is whenever the ball is moving, and then here's the paddle, you want the user to be able to operate the paddle so it can go left and right. And while this is happening, the ball is just moving randomly. And then whenever it collides with the paddle, the user gets a point. And then it'll continue just moving. And so in order to do this, we're going to have to give the paddle some functionality. Okay, so now we can code the paddle. And so first what we do is we go to the event section and we get the when the green flag is clicked block. This is similar to what we did with the ball sprite, and this allows us to provide some functionality to the paddle whenever we click on the green flag. And the next thing we can do is we can go to the motion category and we can drag this block, which is go to X and Y position. And what this does is it allows us to provide a position that we want the paddle to go to at the beginning of the game. So for example, I could do X position 3 and Y position -147. But feel free to play around with this until you get the paddle in a desired position that you want for the game. Yeah, and if you want to be able to put the paddle position in an easier way, what you can do is just drag the paddle wherever you want it to be. Like, for example, I would like the paddle to be right over here. And you can see the X coordinate over here and the Y coordinate over here. So basically, now I can just type in, for the X coordinate, it's 23, and for the Y coordinate, it is -159. And this ensures that the paddle will be able to go into the exact position that you want it to go every single time the user hits the green flag button. Exactly. And it is noteworthy that whenever you see X position, that is referring to the horizontal position. And then whenever you see the Y position, that is referring to the vertical position. Okay, so now let's move on. And so if you've ever played a ping pong game, you may know how whenever the user is operating the paddle, it goes from left to right. And so that's exactly what we want to imitate here. And in order to do that, we want to put the point in direction 90 block. So this is in the motion category still. And what the point in direction 90 block does is it says that the paddle must point in 90 degrees of the direction. Yeah, like for example, if you put point in direction 180 degrees, I want you to take a look at what happens. This is definitely not how a paddle should look for the purpose of the game we're making, just because we want it to move this way. So basically, by establishing that the point in direction is 90 degrees, this makes sure that it alleviates bugs and also just makes the paddle in the orientation that you want it to be. And then the next thing we need to do is we need to go to the control section and we will drag a forever block. And then I want you guys to go to the motion category once again and drag another go to X and go to Y position block. And make sure it's inside the forever block. And I will explain what this means in a second, but then what you have to do is you have to drag the mouse X circular block into the X position. And make sure that the Y position is the same as the Y position that you included in the desired location in this first block. And so now, what does everything I did mean? And so what this block allows us to do is it allows the paddle to go to the X position of our mouse. So wherever we take the mouse, the paddle is going to go in that direction. And let me demonstrate this. So can you see how whenever I move my mouse, then the paddle follows it in the X direction, but the paddle does not change in the Y direction. So in the Y direction, it stays where it is, but in the X position, it follows our mouse and goes that way. Yeah, and it doesn't matter if you put your mouse over here or over here, it won't go up at all. It'll just go left and right, which is what we want. Yes, and notice how whenever the paddle is going to the edge, it's just sliding through, and we don't want that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to first click the stop button here, and then we're going to go to the motion category. And then we're going to add an if on edge bounce block. And this will ensure that the paddle does not slide or go off the screen at any time, and it just stays in the frame that the user can use to play. And so just to demonstrate, as you can see here, now the paddle is not going completely off of the screen. Yeah, and so now we're going to be going back to the ball because like the paddle has pretty good functionality. This is exactly what we want it to do. So I'm going to be clicking on the stop button and then we're going to go back to the ball. And so like I previously mentioned, what we want this game to do is whenever the ball is moving, it hits the paddle and it bounces off. And so in order to do that, we're going to be using a sensing block. Because a sensing block will be able to actually allow the sprites like the ball and the paddle to interact with one another and therefore perform actions relevant. And so let me explain more about what that means. And so what we want is that whenever the ball touches the paddle, so touching paddle. And we're going to be putting this in an if-then block, and I'll be explaining more on that in a little bit. And because we want this to occur throughout the whole game, I'm going to be putting it under the forever block. And so if touching paddle, then, and what we want it to do is bounce practically. So then whenever the ball hits the paddle, it'll move 10 steps and be able to give the illusion of bouncing off of the paddle. And it might also help to put turn 180 degrees, just in order to, again, help with the illusion of the ball bouncing on the paddle. And so let's see where we're at right now. So as you can see, the ball is bouncing from the paddle. It's able to make contact, and if you are not able to put the paddle under the ball continues with its normal functions. And that means that it's functioning. That means that the ball is actually able to sense the presence of the block and therefore able to perform actions regarding it. Okay, I'm going to click the stop button. And so what we want is that whenever the user is able to get the paddle under the ball and hit it and let it bounce, we want them to get a good score. So basically, what we're going to be doing is making a variable. You can think of a variable like a little box. It stores things. And so what we want our variable to store is the user score. And so click on the variable section, and then we're going to make a variable called score. And it's perfectly fine to leave it for all sprites, just because we'll be using this variable throughout the game. Click OK. Okay, so first thing I want to mention is whenever you have a variable, it is important to do something called initialize the variable. And all initialize the variable means is that you're going to set the variable to the desired start number. So for example, whenever you're playing any game, you want to start your score at 0 so that people don't start their scores at 100 or 200 because that would be unfair. So I'm going to be doing set my variable, which I'm going to be changing to score, to 0. And I will place that right under the when the green flag is clicked block. And afterwards, so whenever you think about the ball hitting the paddle, you want the user to get a point because that's, the desired function of the game. So if touching paddle, then you give the functionality to bounce, but you also want to change the score by 1. So let me add that, changed score by 1. Okay, so let's test this out. And by the way, guys, programs are never perfect at the first glance. You can always make programs better, make your coding better. And the best way to do that is practice, 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 as well as trial and error, because there are definitely multiple better ways in order to do a certain aspect of the program. So trust me, it will never be perfect, but you guys can definitely improve on your coding skills this way. And so let's click the green flag and see how it goes. So as you can see, every time the ball hits the paddle, the score is changing by 1. So now I have a score of 5, now I have a score of 6, now I have a score of 7. But if the user is not able to put the paddle under the ball, then you can see that the score remains unchanged, which is good because they're not really getting that point by missing the ball. And so this means that our game is pretty good in terms of functionality, and it's working pretty well. All of our variables are good, our sprites are interacting, our whole software is pretty good. And a software, by the way, is just like a group of codes that are meant for specific functionality. And softwares can be multiple things. In this case, it's a game. Okay. And so now that we have all of the code for a basic, fun ping pong game, what you can do is you can have fun customizing your game and personalizing it so that it looks better and plays better for you. And an example of this is if you look here at where my cursor is, you can click on this and it'll allow you to put a background for your game. So you can go to backdrops, and you can make your own backdrop using all of these functions here. For example, there's a paintbrush, and you can paint. As you can see, I'm not a very good painter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this choose a backdrop button, and it allows me to choose from the vast array of backdrop options Scratch has for us. And so you can scroll through, you can even search. And so I personally like the blue sky background. So I'm going to click on that and notice how it adds it to your game. And so now it makes it more interesting to look at. Okay, and another way that you can customize your game further is you can click on the ball sprite, for example, and you can go to the looks category for code. And remember that the looks category and blocks, they all deal with the appearance of the sprite, which is why this is great for customizing. Yeah, and so for example, what you can do is if you don't like the size of your sprite, for example, then you can set your sprite size to a specific number at the very beginning. So for example, if I think this is too big and I want something a little smaller, I might choose 50%. Set the size of the ball sprite to 50%. And what this will do is whenever I click on it, notice how the size of the ball sprite has gotten 50% smaller. Another way you can customize your game further is by changing the color of the sprite. And so for example, here's a looks block that you can drag. For example, let's say you want the ball to change its color forever. So for example, let's say I want to change the color of the ball by 3. And so once I do that and I click the green flag, notice how it changes color. And it looks so pretty. So yeah, so there are definitely a couple of ways that you can add new dimensions to your game and make it more visually appealing, as well as more fun to play. Yes, and another thing I want to add about the blocks that Bhumika just showed, the change color effect by 3 block that she just showed, if you click the drop-down menu, you'll see a ton of options. And you can definitely experiment with these various options. They all do their own fun kind of thing. For example, the mosaic block, if I was to do that, then you would see that it has a very interesting kind of shape. And if you don't like that, then feel free, to try whatever you would like, because we personally like the color block better. But this is all for what you want what your game to be. And that's what's most important. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you really enjoyed it.